GM, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us for Bitcoin Builders. This is a weekly show that we do where we talk to projects that are building on Bitcoin and projects around the Arch ecosystem. Today's show is going to be focused on a panel of representatives, some founders from around the Arch ecosystem. I'm also joined by Brian, our head of engineering, the Arch team, and maybe joined by Nick, our CMO, here in a little bit, as well as Melina, our beloved ambassador, here with us. Thanks for joining us again this week, Melina. So we'll get into it here shortly. We've got some programming. Again, this is Bitcoin Builders. Up top, I have the link to the space. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and give it a like, reply to it, share it out with your friends, tag some people, and we'll get started here. So first, I just want to touch on Arch and dive into really what we're doing here on Bitcoin. The last several weeks, we've been talking with some different projects. We've had meme coins on here. We've had Pizza Ninjas on here last week talking about some innovation that they've done. But getting back into the Arch ecosystem, I'm excited to talk with some projects here and talk with you, Brian, and get an update real quick from the engineering perspective. Ultimately, Arch, what we're doing is building this and getting ready to launch on Mainnet very soon. We'll give some updates here in a little bit as far as where we're at with those sort of things. Arch is the execution environment for Bitcoin. It brings seamless execution for DeFi and a seamless user experience when it comes to deploying apps directly to Bitcoin. It's all accessible from your Bitcoin wallet, which I think is an exciting prospect. We talk about trading with crypto and getting into DeFi opportunities, and now to bring all of that back to Bitcoin is an exciting thing. To get into some specifics with today's programming, I'm going to throw it over to Brian. First, just a question to pose to you. What's going on with the engineering team? Where are we at in terms of the build out and things going on from the perspective of the code? We've been updating everyone that we've been in our security audit and getting ready for mainnet. So if you wouldn't mind, give us an update and go ahead. Oh, and I don't hear you, Brian. We might need to have you drop down and come back.
I really hope that's not the update, Brian, on that on Arch mainnet. Just pure silence.
Hopefully we'll get Brian back up here in just a second. But Haas, thanks for joining me.
No
Uh,
dramas, buddy. I'm always here to save the day. I'm looking forward to the spaces.
yeah, exciting. As am I. It's been about a month or so since we've heard from any projects that are building on Arch. So
Where is Hex? That's my other question. Well, why is Saturn not on this?
I'm not sure, but about 6 weeks ago, we spoke with Hex, and he was,
About I remember.
but yeah,
Busy.
everybody's busy, of course. Thanks everybody for joining us. We've got Haas from Ordeez. We've got Guy from VoltFi. I believe Daniel's behind the Autara account.
Jim.
Yep. And we'll kick it off to each one of you here shortly, but we're going to start with an update from Brian from the engineering team. Brian, can you hear us? Oh, we still don't have.
Oh man,
I don't know. Can anybody else hear Brian?
I can't hear him, Brian. But I was really excited for his update because we've been talking about Arch mainnet for it seems like forever now, and I think I'm here with Haz and everyone else on stage thinking, hey man, can't wait to hear about this update. So hopefully we get his technical issues sorted out.
I'm gonna send him a message. Brian, I don't know if you're down in the listeners now, but try closing out all of your apps that you have open and then reopen the Twitter app. Sometimes that'll work, but We'll see if we can get him back here shortly. I guess we can just move forward with what the plan is today. Ultimately, I'm excited to hear from all the different teams, like what's the perspective. And I think that even some of the projects are you've deployed on testnet, but not all of you. So it's going to be exciting to kind of, refresh the audience and even myself. I always like hearing from the perspective teams that are building on Arch, what they're doing and how they're, like extending this experience on Bitcoin. Brian, I hear you.
You can hear me now? Okay, I switched browsers. Sorry, guys.
No, you're good. It's honestly spaces. I mean, it happens all the time. But yeah, we hear you now. So I don't know if you could hear me earlier, but thanks for joining us. I asked you to give us sort of an update from the engineering team.
Oh, I thought you wanted me to talk about Taylor Swift getting married. That was the update. But yeah, I could talk about Arch, I guess.
Oh my God, let's talk about Taylor. Brian, how can you say that and tease us?
I'll later.
We'll save it. Anyway, yeah, okay. So lots of things, really, really good things cooking. As Brian mentioned, we're deep in the audit. We're trying to push towards a, mainnet release. And so there's a lot of those types of activities happening as we kind of try to finalize things. But I did want to just kind of run through a few things that I think the community might find interesting. One is we're actually starting to build in some new crypto primitives into the network that we're not really seeing elsewhere. We had some code pushed around the NIZIC a primitive, which basically allows us to start thinking about adding privacy actions and more lightweight verifications to really optimize the chain in the future. This is something that starts building towards a true privacy experience. We also reshipped our version 2 of our resharing algorithm, which is another really unique aspect of Arch, which is the whole threshold key resharing. This means that the validator set can change without having to halt the whole network. It makes it safer for us to switch out validators, makes it more resilient for doing different multi-party signing actions. This is just another upgrade on how a decentralized network like this will function without causing severe drama for the ecosystem. Another big one is, and I know that this is a Bitcoin builders focused talk, but because we're so closely related to a lot of what Solana has been doing, we've continued to try and expand ways in which we can onboard Solana developers more easily as well. So this has happened lately through extending support for different syscalls and built-in loaders. So we have like this associated token account support now that's throughout our SDK. CLI allows us to do all of our token activities. So the new release that we're going to be putting out probably today or tomorrow will show the CLI get APL token functionality, which means you can transfer, burn, lock, freeze APL tokens, and you can also do all of those actions using multi-signature accounts as well. That'll all be able to be done through the SDK and the CLI natively. Been testing that out. It's great. And so that's super exciting. We also migrated, like there was some inconsistency about how our addresses and things are displayed, whether we use hex or base 58, which is obviously much more readable. So we've taken steps to make that more consistent so that you see what you expect on wallets and explorers and things like that. Another big one is we introduced UTXO signing with seeds, which is huge because now you're talking about getting to things like treasury flows, bridgings, settlement logic that basically can interact with Bitcoin directly, but Arch essentially orchestrates that, right? So it creates like a composability situation that's like so much better than what we had previously. And so, it really gets you closer to like, we're using Bitcoin. We're not like, this is not bridging to other things, right? Like we're just using native Bitcoin. We've also spent a lot of time, obviously, due to the audits and things, is like reevaluating how do we harden our validator nodes? How do we harden the network? And so there's all things like snapshot verifications, different kinds of bootstrap security things that we've been putting in. We've got execution reports, which gives the validators a way to see like what's going wrong, what might be happening, like much better. And so it's just a better experience for like creating a reliable network. And there's all kinds of adversarial tests that we've added. So we create scenarios in which we try to see if we can suss out edge cases and make sure we eliminate those for the future. And then finally, the big one that I think will impact a lot of people who are on the inside, which is that we get questions a lot is like, when's the next official release? When can we see these new features that you guys are talking about all the time? Well, we now are publishing nightly builds. So the CLI, the validator, if you're running your own local network or you're a developer, you can just get a nightly build. And that is like our like screaming latest version. It's everything we push to our main branch right there. And that goes out every night, provided there have been changes in the last 24 hours. And you can go download those now. So you don't have to wait for the official releases if you want to try that. And then we also are going to support that by having 2 test nets. One test net is going to be a latest stable release, and the other public test net will be this bleeding edge latest one. And so you'll be able to actually use our public infrastructure, the Bitcoin node, the testnet node, and our validator network in those 2 scenarios. And you won't have to run those, and everybody will be able to interact with each other on those test nets. So those are not completely up and running full speed yet, but we'll announce when that happens pretty soon. And I think that those are the big highlights that I wanted to bring up. That's quite a bit, but obviously there's still a lot of work to do, but we're really trying hard to make sure that the developer experience gets better and better and better. So we really appreciate you guys hanging on with us and look forward to seeing what you guys can build on it. So thanks, Brian. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. I've got a couple quick follow-up questions. First, where can people pay attention to those like announcements and then go and find the resources specifically that you're talking about?
The nightly build resources that I mentioned are going to be published at the same place where the official releases are. So that's on GitHub in the arch-node repository. You can just find those under the releases section. We also have updated the book.arch.network with the latest documents on how to use APL token, CLI, and all of that. It's all already updated. So you can find out more about that. And then as far as like interacting with us, I think we're trying to migrate a lot of the developer experience over to Circle, but that's pretty new. So I don't know, Brian, you probably know more than that.
But yeah, so you know probably about as much as I do. I do know that up and running. And as far as resources getting there, we've got a lot of things coming. There are some like FAQ items and some other things there if you've already gotten into Circle, but just stay tuned for more on that front. Nope, all good.
Just overwhelmed them with too many updates. Yeah.
Okay, Brian, thanks for coming and giving us the update. Super bullish on what the team's building and can't wait for mainnet release. So we'll let you go and get back to it. And then thanks again, everybody. If you tuned in here just a second ago since we got started, up top, there's the link of the space. If you wouldn't mind sharing it, give it a like, give it a repost. We'd appreciate that. Help us out with the algorithm. And we do have Arcova shared a post up top. We've got Haas up here as well and Daniel. And then I'm sure we'll get Guy back up here. Or if you want to try to join from the VoltFi account, that would work as well. But if you guys each want to get a post pinned up, we'll kind of go around the panel. And essentially what we're going to be talking about today is just sort of like an update from all of the different teams. I mean, I'll probably even just start with a question about like, what is it that you're building on Arch? We can get sort of like this short introduction, especially even, some of them are, you just recently announced, Autara. We've heard a little bit about what you guys are building, but I'm always excited to hear more and learn more about yielding and earning with Bitcoin. And then obviously we've got Ordeez in the borrowing and lending sphere as well. But I think we'll start with Arcova, then we'll go around the panel. If you guys wouldn't mind, get something pinned up top from maybe your account in post or something for people to have something accessible to get to each of the project's landing page. But Sterling, we'll go ahead and start with you. I always think it's so interesting hearing about Arcova and what you guys are building, especially, I find the perspective of introducing it as tech that is building using ordinal theory. I always find that interesting. And ultimately, I feel like that gets to the heart of provenance and putting data and securing that using Bitcoin. And it's a good, I just imagine that as a really good sort of introductory conversation to what Arcova is doing when it comes to building on Bitcoin and the product offering that you guys have. So go ahead and give us the quick introduction and let us know what's going on. What stage are you guys at? What's exciting and what's coming soon?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's always great to join you and the team. It's been fun to be on this journey with the Arch Network. It's what's really fun, just as an aside, is I met so many of the people here in Vegas that I can now put like girl in the metaverse. Like I've met you in real life. We've had lunch together, we've hung out. So many people here. I've finally been able to put faces to over the last year or so, and it's been so great, and the community's really been great. But yeah, so my co-founders Nessie and Tickle Snarf, I nearly dox them every time I say their names now because, yeah. But we came up with this idea about a little over a year ago, late last July. It started as a simple idea. What if we could verify credentials on chain? What if we could build an engine that verifies credentials on chain? Even back then, a year and a half ago, we were talking about credential fraud, academic fraud, diploma mills, and stuff like that, and how hard it is for employers and universities to really track these sort of things. And from there, it sort of has evolved into a full-on compliance product suite. So just to give you an idea, Arcova is building a compliance-first platform that makes credentials and critical documents tamper-proof, status-aware, and instantly verifiable. We do this by anchoring trust on Bitcoin while letting issuers keep custody of their originals, so anyone can check authenticity and revocation of credentials or documents in seconds without relying on a centralized vendor, which is really important. Our MVP proves the core flow of issuing, sharing, and verifying a credential. So basically, what we're building right now is a self-aware compliant jurisdictional aware compliance engine. The first product and what we've really been working on over the last couple of weeks since the last time I was on the show is building out and determining what we should build first and when. So we've brought on an incredible CPO to join our team. Her name's Perry Winkle, or goes by Perry. Absolutely brilliant woman. She has a PhD in computer science from New York University. She worked at Google, Meta, founded a protocol called Glitter that was actually working with maybe Arch Network, to put it generously, for a while. But I met her through Arch and the Arch team as well. And she's come on and helped me, myself, Nessie, Tickle Snarf, and the final member of our team, which is Nick, who's also running marketing for Arch. She's come on and really helped us direct our product and our MVP in a good fashion. So what we're doing from a technical perspective right now is we are building our proof of concept and our MVP out. We're starting with a credential verification engine where credentialing agencies, universities, stuff like that, can verify that the person they are hiring holds this degree or holds this certain credential. And that's a simplification of the process. But from there, we will be moving into regulated industries, helping law firms track contracts and things like that, and the status of contracts, all up to what we're building out in totality, which is this automated compliance engine where eventually enterprises will be able to go in, click a single button, and reduce the audit preparation time from months and hundreds of thousands of dollars of prep work, hiring companies like Deloitte and McKinsey, to a couple of hours where your general counsel and your chief compliance officer press a button. All the necessary information is provided for you. Compliance score is given to you. So say, hey, you're 85% compliant with the local laws and regulations here in the United States. Here's where you're deficient, blah, blah, blah. Here's what we suggest you do to fix this deficiency. So long term, we're really building this compliance engine. But first is the proof of concept, which should be available in the next couple of months. We've also been locking down pilot partners, getting people signed to letters of intent, and all that fun stuff. So it's a long process. It's very difficult, I'm learning, but it's a lot of fun as well. You meet a lot of great people and you get to come on spaces like this and hang out. So really excited about it.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me, because ultimately at the end of the day, this is a product that's being built to fit into a real world existing industry, but it's a real world product and providing a new solution leveraging Bitcoin. I had a real quick question, and we
Sure.
get too technical. I know you're not the technical person on your team either, but you do have an understanding to the point that you can explain it in ways that I think are meaningful. But I was curious, you guys are obviously it's still a, real audits, and it's like real information data that's being collected and published from like the maybe your customer facing product. But on the other side of things, you're leveraging Arch, you're leveraging Bitcoin. I was curious if you could just kind of explain a little bit more about that side of things. How is it that you're leveraging Arch? How is it that you're leveraging Bitcoin?
Absolutely.
I think by way of example, it might lead to some imagination, if you will, for others to understand some of the things that you can do with Arch technical standpoint.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's really funny because when I'm talking to you guys here, we're talking about Bitcoin and blockchain a lot. But if I go out and talk to some of our pilot partners or potential investors, we never mention Bitcoin. We very rarely mention the blockchain, even though it's powered that way, because we just don't want to turn people off and be confusing. But here's how we're using it, right? So, well, first and foremost, you can create a digital fingerprint on Bitcoin every time you inscribe something, and that fingerprint can be embedded with certain metadata. So what we are doing is embedding that fingerprint with some legally compliant metadata that can help you track digital signatures, help you track version control, history, all that good stuff. Where we're really using Arch and how we're really going to use Arch is in a couple of different ways. The first and foremost is right now, transactions on Bitcoin mainnet are fairly, inexpensive, about one sat, each, maybe even a little less. But as Bitcoin scales and continues to get adopted, that's going to go up. We've all been in situations where we're paying 50, 60, 100 plus sats to mint something or what have you. That's going to be a major turnoff to enterprises, for example. They don't want to pay that much by and large. So that's where Arch comes in. Arch, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of technical compatibility with Solana. And most importantly, I think for at least this conversation is we are able to, or Arch is able to process transactions at the speed and cost of Solana. And that's massively important because while we may be dealing with regulated industries like legal, finance, healthcare, stuff like that, where they will want some of this cryptographic proof on Bitcoin mainnet, and might be willing to pay $3-4 per hash for that. There's also going to be, the guy who wants to track the guy who owns a jewelry store who puts his Rolexes on chain as a certificate of authenticity. That person's not going to necessarily want to pay, several dollars per certificate of authenticity because it's not a regulated industry. Why would he? In that case, he can choose to inscribe these hashes on Arch Network, pay significantly less fees. And yeah, but the second part from that is, let's say you have a project management professional, a PMP certificate from the Project Management Institute here in the United States. Every couple of years or every year or so, they require you to take continuing education credits to maintain the status of your active PMP or whatever professional license. If you don't complete those within a certain time period and you can't prove that you've completed them, then your membership lapses, and technically you're no longer a certified project manager. By the way, I know this because I've let my own PMP lapse and refuse to do the education requirements because I know for a fact that no employer is checking to make sure these are done. Now, this has led to scenarios here in the United States where it was recently uncovered that 28 high-ranking officials here in the United States federal government alone have been found with top secret clearance who have fake diplomas and degrees and credentials from mills and fraudulent factories. There's an estimated 250,000 fake credentials granted each year in the United States, another 300,000 in Canada. That's a massive risk to corporations. So using Arch Network, people will be able to check on the status of these credentials. So my PMP that expired in 2019, that I've still been saying that I have, even though I technically don't. If I apply for a job and they're using the Arcova system, because of Arch, we will be able to easily go and toggle the status of this credential as active, revoked, and then add notes into why it's inactive. And all that's verifiable. That's all because of Arch.
So ultimately, Arcova can be used for different applications within this whole, right? Sometimes documentation needs to be publicly accessible, but other times it doesn't. It needs to be accessible by people that need to access it. So I'm sure it's a case by case basis when it comes to that
Oh, absolutely.
graphic hashing of the data itself anyways, right? So your products from customer standpoint are probably going to be a bit tailored to what it is that they're verifying. Is that right?
That's 100% accurate. We've identified 6 different sectors that are really good targets. We've narrowed it down for our MVP down to 2 core sectors. And pretty much this certificate and verification and credentialing type situation, as well as a verification for regulated industries. And each of those products is different. Each of those products seems similar, but they're different. Like for credentials, you don't need a bunch of complex compliance. Your hashes don't need to meet these complex compliance standards for a digital certificate. But for a signed contract, it needs to meet. So yeah, there are multiple different products across multiple different industries. And the cool thing is, if we build one, we've already built up most of the infrastructure for the others. So Arcova itself is going to be like a platform. And the platform itself is going to have several products coming off of it. The credentialing and verification is the first one, right? So that's the first product we're developing. The second product will be something else. I'm not going to get into it. Third product will be something else, but they're all going to be connected to compliance. The ultimate goal is we are a one-stop shop for compliance. We are a one-stop compliance engine. We don't go in looking to replace existing systems. We're more of a middleware in that way. So we integrate with SharePoint or with Google Docs or with iManage. The goal is always to find out creative ways to promote Bitcoin and to promote activity on Arch Network. And I think that's where we really will benefit Arch Network is we'll be able to provide Arch Network with a steady stream of users daily. For any protocol to survive, you need to show it's active. And Arcova is going to be hopefully one of the most active, if not the most active application on Arch Network. So, that's our hope at least.
Well, thank you for sharing. I appreciate the update and yeah, excited to see you guys progress and get to a point of, launching your product and getting it out there. So thanks again for coming and we'll go ahead and transition here to Autara. We've got Daniel with us from the Autara team and Autara is providing yield and liquidity for Bitcoin on the base layer, building on Arch. And honestly, I'm interested to hear a little bit more from you. I know you guys have announced and you've published your documentation and I've read through everything and understanding the product and offering is great, but honestly just excited to hear from you and get an update directly from the source. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and unmute and give us the update on where things are. Maybe you could start with what is Autara, what you guys are building. I mean, I gave a little bit of introduction there, but all the specifics for us, if you wouldn't mind, short introduction into what is Autara, and then let us know like what stage you guys are at, and we'll continue from there.
Yeah, of course. So Daniel here from the Autara team. First of all, I'd like to say I'm very excited for Arcova. Heard you speak at multiple spaces now. Very excited to start checking it out, seeing the auditing happening there. So Autara is a Bitcoin native money market. We're built on Arch Network. And so it'll allow users to supply Bitcoin or any other supported asset on Arch Network to earn competitive yield by supplying it to our risk isolated pools. Our architecture is very modular. We have modular interest rate models. So depending on which asset, you can have different sorts of yields depending on how much people are willing to pay to borrow. We're focused on becoming the safest and simplest place for Bitcoiners to get liquidity against their Bitcoin. And so recently we made a partnership with the best Oracle provider we could think of to power our markets. More details coming soon. And also happy to share that soon all big stable coins will be available on Autara and Arch Network. So you can have those stable coins against your Bitcoin. And yeah, right now we're finalizing our testnet deployment. Our app is coming soon, so the community can test it out before we get onto mainnet.
Yeah, super bullish. Obviously, when it comes to earning yield from Bitcoin, this is one of the most exciting prospects, I'd say. Even just, that's at the heart of even the concept of Bitcoin DeFi is just yielding from Bitcoin, Bitcoin becoming active. I was even going to ask, like, what are some of the, you mentioned isolated liquidity pools. If you could give just like a brief explanation of what that means. And I was going to ask, like, what are some of the assets that people are going to be able to, provide liquidity for and against in these pools?
Yeah, of course. So our first pools will be mostly based on stablecoins. So we want to bring dollar liquidity to Bitcoiners. Then really because of our modular architecture, it means that we can anything of value on Arch Network, we can spin up a market, and it's actually permissionless for anyone to create a isolated pool. And what does that mean? It means that when people are lending their assets, instead of it being a shared pool, you only have the two assets involved. So the one that the user is posting as collateral and the one that the user is loaning. So you have some people supplying the asset, for example, Bitcoin, which you can earn yield on. And then you have, for example, a stable coin. And so what that means is, let's say we want to add another market where you have maybe not so liquid meme coin. If the meme coin were to, let's say, pull a minus 99% in a day, and liquidators, these are people who repay people's loans that don't pay them back to keep the suppliers whole, then instead of the the supplier being exposed to that meme coin, they can say, okay, I only want to be exposed to the risks of, let's say, a stable coin and Bitcoin. I don't want to be wondering or worrying, how is what happens if this meme coin absolutely dumps? How will it affect the safety of Autara altogether? Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, it does. So you're not talking about like sourcing liquidity across different pools when you get
Exactly.
things like that from like a user side of things, right? So when it comes to the borrowing and lending with the liquidity pools, actually I got sidetracked on your last response. It is exciting to hear about, what's going on with Autara. I think I was going to ask about the Oh, okay. Yeah. So it is open and decentralized. So from like a pool standpoint, anybody can participate in an existing pool, or you could, for example, open up a new pool, right? If you want a
Exactly.
different token or something, right?
Exactly. So let's say somebody has a lot of a meme coin, and then they could create a market themselves and say, "Hey, I'm willing to supply this meme coin to anybody who wants to borrow it just against, let's say, a stable coin." And so in the beginning, our front end is going to be permissioned, so as to not have maybe what we would consider unsafe markets available to users, but whoever creates this permissionless pool could easily integrate it into their own front end with our API. And really, the goal with all of this is just to be the safest place for Bitcoiners to come and get liquidity.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even getting kind of like one layer deep, you talked about stable coins and then also meme coins, getting into that next layer. So from like a, like a meme coin standpoint, opening up a new pool, it's open and permissionless, getting to, I mean, that's assuming that the standard is supported. So you'll be supporting, I mean, we were talking earlier about the APL standard, and maybe even Brian, if you're here, you could chime in on this a little bit if it's relevant. But when it comes to like runes, BRC20s, the different fungible token standards on Bitcoin, people going to be able to like I open up an isolated liquidity pool against, say, like we've got Pups token in the audience. Billy, I see Billy down there. Are we talking about these coins as well?
So in the beginning, we're only going to be supporting the APL standard. And the reason being is that to keep these markets safe, we need liquidators to act. And unfortunately, because of Bitcoin's slow blocks, we can't guarantee that the liquidator will be able to be made whole in those 10 minutes if the Bitcoin, if the meme coin keeps crashing. So we don't want to have a scenario where the liquidator has to catch a falling knife and then they decide to step away from the market and then it happens. So the suppliers are left without their initial capital. And so that's why we're very thankful to Arch for being able to have those fast block times so that we can have these markets possible.
Yeah, so and still very much, an exciting, like talking about stable coins and direct yield from Bitcoin being at the heart of Bitcoin DeFi. So can't wait for Autara to launch and to see all of this come to, to fruition.
Thank you.
I think that I don't know if I heard some like behind the scenes talk about maybe like an upcoming product demo or something. Do you have any information about that?
Yeah. So we recently made a partnership with the best Oracle provider we could think of. And as soon as they're live, we'll have a live testnet deployment that people can come test out. And hopefully that comes before mainnet, or even I'd rather say, hopefully mainnet comes before that. But yeah, more info coming soon, and I don't want to spoil the details.
All right, all right. We won't dig any deeper, but make sure that you follow the Altera account and stay tuned for any news. I'm definitely excited to see some more and to test it out, and on mainnet to obviously use the product. We talk about that all the time. It always comes up from time to time that we're excited to use these products ourselves and to have Bitcoin put to use. So super bullish to talk about it and to see it kind of coming on the horizon. So thanks again for coming and sharing and giving us the update. But we've also got Lass here with us. I don't know if Guy is going to make it back up here or not. Maybe we'll get you back up here as well. But we'll go ahead and continue with Haas or Ordeez. I know that you guys do have your product deployed on testnet. Ordeez is borrowing and lending solution for ordinals. I think that maybe you're thinking about runes in the future, but it's not on the platform quite yet. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, go ahead and unmute and give us a quick intro about your product and where people can go and test it out and how things are going.
Yeah, Jim, guys, thank you. It was good to listen to everyone in the space. I think it's nice to see Daniel and the Arcova guys. I met with Daniel actually while we were in Dubai, if I'm correct. He was just kind of exploring what's going on with Arch and stuff, which is really good to see that he's building out Autara, which I think will be good for everyone within the ecosystem anyway. But essentially, Ordeez is a liquidity protocol. And what we're doing, one of our first products is building out buy now, pay later for, I want to say Bitcoin assets. I don't want to narrow ourselves down just to ordinals. Not saying it's not a big enough market. Of course, there's a lot of assets within the Bitcoin ecosystem that deserve respect and definitely something we're exploring. So yes, we are looking at runes, but again, our first product is a buy now, pay later, essentially. So allowing individuals to put a 20% down payment, the remaining 80% will be facilitated by Ordeez. And then of course, there's a locking up period. And most importantly is how we utilize Arch. We utilize actually Arch programs to allow two things. The first one, of course, is the escrow mechanism. So allowing there to be a safe space for the asset to be held. And then, of course, there's a token receipt. So allowing individuals to actually track and see what was going on with the asset itself. So it's been definitely good for us. I think we're one of the earlier guys. We've been in contact with Arch now for, I'd say, close to 6 to 8 months, somewhere along the lines. We're more than excited to be finally that Arch is looking at releasing onto the mainnet, hopefully next month or next couple of months. But more importantly, I think we're excited to actually push our own product out to the Ordinals ecosystem. I think one of the things that Ordinals lack, or in general Bitcoin assets lack, is the lack of liquidity or financing. I think one of the things that we're looking to do is bring that capital injection. I think capital injection is two things. Firstly, is of course external capital injection, which is normally the likes of liquidity. So where you've got someone like Autara or other liquidity protocols who are looking at ways of borrowing and lending. And then, of course, the other aspect is looking at how we can actually do that within Bitcoin assets or separate Bitcoin assets like Ordinals itself. So we're hoping we can contribute towards that. I mean, instead of buying one Ordinal, you could buy 5. And I think that kind of helps with a couple of things. The first one, of course, is there's a more diverse factor when it comes to, sweeping the floor with certain assets. And then, of course, it's having the versatility to be able to have 3 different investor types within an asset class. So your short, your medium, and your long-term investor. So someone who's a short-term is someone who just wants to trade. I mean, one of the reasons why I thought the BNPL would be so good for the Bitcoin ecosystem was because I previously used to trade NFTs. And one of the things we used to use, I really forgot what it was called, but it was an NFT bot which would very quickly buy and sell on floor prices. So essentially you would be able to sweep a floor and change the floor prices and stuff and buy and sell very quickly. And I think one of the things that the Ordinals ecosystem lacks is the lack of tooling systems or mechanisms that are available to do certain things. So I think the BNPL itself is not just tied down to Ordinals itself, but like you mentioned, with this many different things that we can look into. Ordinals, runes, arcanes is a new one, and anything that comes forward from this point forward, yeah.
That's definitely true from a trading experience. And ultimately, like this just comes back to being on Bitcoin and having 10-minute blocks and the solutions that just simply aren't there at a base layer standpoint. And it was very slow for them to be built, for people to even be able to figure out how to replicate some of the experience to get to the point of just trading the assets. Obviously, we know that Liquidium exists as a borrowing and lending platform, but now getting to the point where we're going to be able to have these more seamless experiences created from trading these assets standpoint, I think is exciting. So, I mean, not to get too far into speculation, but even like the buy now, pay later, I think is exciting to then provide some kind of speculation, I think, to how things could be when it comes to trading ordinals and even like trading runes. Cause you can imagine like if these solutions that allow for more seamless trading experiences with non-fungible token assets, like individual ordinals, where we can even talking about like building out a trading bot or having like sweeping features on your site or having borrowing lending like just against a pool. Like these are all aspects that are new and pushing forward the technical side of Bitcoin to the point that they can be unlocking more explosive features in other applications is kind of like where my mind goes. So I think that Ordeez is kind of one of those projects that you're at the forefront of that. To see where you go from here, I think will be exciting, expanding on just the product offering when it comes to like being a trading toolkit almost, or you could think about it that way for people who are trading ordinals.
No, for sure. I think one of the things that we recently started to explore was, I mean, we've always said that fungibles or non-fungibles, when you talk about tokens within the buy now pay later, of course, it comes down as, leverage trading or margin trading. But of course, trying to find the aspect of why buy now pay later works for token assets itself is is more about the ownership aspect. And I think that's the only real differentiator from margin trading. So I think one of the things that we're looking at now is exactly how that would work in the near future. But I think what makes more sense, I mean, look, let's be honest. If we're talking about making Bitcoin faster, of course, Arch is going to certainly help with that. But inevitably, Bitcoin is always going to be a slower asset than your EVMs and your Solanas. I think instead of trying to fight against that, I think we're playing with it. So I think it's difficult to really have that margin trading aspect or that quick trading aspect of doing something on Bitcoin. So I think that kind of works in our favor. But I think we're excited about the potential that we have within this. I mean, to really understand what Ordeez is trying to build. So it's a suite of product. Buy now, pay later not only facilitates the aspect of ordinals or runes or arcanes, but it also facilitates our backend service as well. So it also facilitates the fact that we have the escrow mechanism, that we have a staking mechanism where, for an example, individuals can come and stake Bitcoin to be a part of, earning yield on something like this. So there's a lot of tech that has been built out. But I think the other aspect of this is what we're looking forward to the most is how much potential we have into a up and coming and a new asset. I think the difference mainly around ordinals itself is the NFTs on Ethereum and Solana. There's a community and the culture that we have within Bitcoin. And I always say, I think if I was somebody who just got into Bitcoin or into crypto right now, the first thing I would look at is, okay, what is Bitcoin? And then potentially I would explore that ecosystem first. So I think we're definitely in the right space. And I think we're excited more than anybody to get to mainnet now, just because we have a test net. I mean, just some of the stats that we've recently been playing around with. I mean, we're currently having to build out a system within our testnet that will actually allow people to list their ordinals back onto the marketplace that we created for testnet, just because everyone's kind of swiped everything up. We've over 15,000 registered users now. And I think the last time I checked, it was, over 120 BTC that had been staked, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't sound like a lot. But it always comes back to my theory of, I was asked a question in a team call actually, of whether we should start to look into ETH collections. At first I said, no, we're a Bitcoin eco, and why would we look at ETH collections? But then the point someone made is when we speak about true DeFi, and I think Arch is definitely looking towards becoming that DeFi ecosystem for sure with the likes of Autara, Arcova, and some of these other guys, is ETH definitely is miles ahead when it comes to DeFi on chain. And I think one of the things that we can learn is a lot of the guys who are in DeFi started off as PFP collectors and collectors on an NFT. And then over time, what they decided to do was stay on the chain and explore the likes of Aave and everything like this. So I think, definitely one of the things we're trying to do is not only stick to Bitcoin, but also look at other chains as well, just to really bring more people from our other ecosystems onto Bitcoin, which essentially will not only just benefit Ordeez on Arch, but will also benefit Arch itself and products within the Arch ecosystem. And I think that's kind of crucial to what we're building. I think it's important to also understand that within our ecosystem itself, I think we've definitely seen a growth. I think we're definitely looking forward to being on that mainnet to see some of these products working live and in action. And actually, just to some of them haters out there who've always said, Arch this and Arch that. And, every time it's like, when mainnet? And hopefully we can answer that question and create some more hype around Arch ecosystem itself as well.
Yeah, this part you're talking about, I couldn't agree more. Like Bitcoin just makes sense. A couple weeks ago, and like wanting to trade on Bitcoin, the sentiment of Bitcoin makes sense in and of itself, and then that next step of being able to trade with Bitcoin-based assets. A couple weeks ago, we had a panel of some of the meme coin founders and leaders in the meme coin ecosystem. And this was the point that Leonidas pointed out when it comes to meme coins on Bitcoin. And this narrative fits with anything on Bitcoin, stable coins on Bitcoin, DeFi on Bitcoin, all of these things next to Bitcoin and getting it as close to Bitcoin as possible is a sentiment that makes perfect sense to everyone. When it comes to people that are in the crypto ecosystem, just like you're pointing out, people get onboarded to whatever. A lot of people came into the Ethereum ecosystem because of the newfound application of NFTs and the art movement that we all know about, right? Dan Held is one of our partners, and he talks about NFTs being a different acquisition model when it comes to customer acquisition models of blockchain. So people discover that this art project that they learned about that their friend thought was cool, or they heard their friend sold it or whatever, is the next thing that they hear, right? So then they're like, what do you mean they sold it? And then they learn that it's like attached to this financial rails and tokenization and like, oh, it's that crypto thing. And then maybe they learn a little bit more about it. I think that eventually everyone that stays long enough, you get to Bitcoin and learning about Bitcoin. If you become a person who is staying in the industry, working in the industry, if you're just a trader or a collector, everyone learns about Bitcoin. And it makes perfect sense that people that are outside of the ecosystem will have the same experience, but in a different way. So they learn about Bitcoin, and then as if they can start to understand things that they can do with it, it'll make more sense that they'll want to do it with Bitcoin. Like they're not going to want to go to these other more speculative tokens that are risky and volatile. I mean, in a second, we're going to get into capitalizing on volatility when it comes to Bitcoin when we talk about VoltFi and how that can be beneficial. Outside the space, looking in perspective, call them the normies. They've accepted Bitcoin, and it makes more sense to take the leap to using Bitcoin and just using Bitcoin for these other yield bearing strategies that they can do with it if they learn about those sort of things and start to become interested in DeFi. We're getting to a point where now, and the whole thesis of Arch is that you don't even need to leave Bitcoin. You can just stay here, stay in your Bitcoin wallet, and do all of these different things. So super exciting to hear from you, Ordeez. And I think we'll go ahead and transition over to VoltFi. And speaking of, like ways to earn from your Bitcoin.
Wait,
And
Brian, we need to ask them all before we close out. Like, what are all of you gonna do to pump our bags?
oh, we'll get to that, Melina.
I was scared the Swift just got engaged, so I'm hoping that pumps everyone's bags as well. Actually,
Let's go.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that question. I was gonna have you ask everybody that so we could close with some excitement. So hold your thoughts, everyone, on that question. We'll come back to it. But VoltFi specifically, I think, is an exciting product because it's another tool in the DeFi trading toolkit. And when it comes to like a solution for how can I be yielding and earning from my crypto holdings when the price is going up, when the price is going down. Sometimes the first thought you'll go to is, okay, well, you can short or long, there's leverage trading, but that's got this risk involved. So I think things like VoltFi and the product that you guys are bringing as a solution is something that, to say the least, is very interesting to learn about and exciting. So if you wouldn't mind, give us just a brief introduction. What is VoltFi? What can we do with it? I do think that you guys have your site up and running so people can at least look at the product, or at least a starting product on testnet. Go ahead and let us know what's going on and where we can go. I think I pinned something up if people want to take a look.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for the warm introduction. My name is Guy. I'm from the VoltFi team. And exciting times building towards Mainnet all these couple months and the next several weeks as we get close to action. It's really exciting. But a little bit about VoltFi. VoltFi, we're developing the first Bitcoin native perps on Bitcoin. And Arch Network, through its programmability layer, it's helping us get really good trading speeds for the perp decks. And the challenge we see without Arch is that you gotta do what institutions don't want to do, because institutions are searching for Bitcoin yield on chain. They don't want to give up custody. They don't want to wrap BTC. They don't want to trust a centralized exchange. And that's the future we're building. We're creating something native that you can use your native Bitcoin and generate yield from it. Why the perp DEX? Perp DEX has several advantages. We started VoltFi focusing on the volatility aspect of Bitcoin, because to a lot of people, volatility is a pain. But to traders, volatility is an asset. It's how you generate alpha. And perp DEXs dominate DeFi volume on other chains. And we feel that Bitcoin is next. And Bitcoin DeFi needs perps because perps drives liquidity, usage, and revenue, and get the whole Arch flywheel turning. So our goal at VoltFi is to do our part on the ecosystem to try to bring these users from the outside, or users that hold native Bitcoin and want to get a little bit on top of it. Because listen, we all know if you own Bitcoin, you're already ahead of everyone. But what if you get yield on top of it? It's gonna be impossible to dominate. So that's a brief overview of what we're doing. Actually, just to complete, Brian, we're on testnet for the last 3 months. It's a DGen option play. It's a gamified way to do derivatives. And why did we do that? Because that's a product targeted towards Arch point farmers. And by doing that, we were able to test our code, our whole engine, our prices, and we got close to 5,000 wallets and over 70,000 trades to prove that we're in the right way. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate you coming. Thanks for giving us the update. And so the perp stacks, this is an expansion of the product offering. Is that right?
That's not in the site. That's the alpha.
Right.
We held that really close. And to have a perp DEX, you gotta have several solutions prior to that. And what we've been developing the last few months was towards this point. So we started with the Bitcoin VIX, a Bitcoin volatility token. That helps us go towards options, because volatility is a major component in options pricing. And our volatility token was a perpetual volatility token. In our perps, we're also going to have implicit volatility and realized volatility perps, which is another way of trading options without having the time decay. It's a little bit complex what I'm saying here, but we're going to make it simpler to turn coin volatility into actual yield. That's the goal.
There you go, Molina. That's the alpha. Now you can do everything that you could do in DeFi on other chains right here on Bitcoin. And everybody just hasn't fully realized that yet. And that's why we haven't gone up quite yet. But also, Arch isn't on Mainnet.
Another thing that I want to share here is that we're working with a Signa, which has a multi-sig solution that will bridge our perp DEX to institutions holding Bitcoin, all inside of Arch Network. It should be awesome.
Yeah, that is exciting. Mentioning Asigna, I mean, stay tuned. We'll have more information coming with what we're doing with Asigna. So we'll have some content and news and things coming out related to them. Might be able to have them on the Bitcoin builders here shortly, but we'll see. Yeah, thanks for coming, Guy. Thanks for the update on VoltFi. Trading perps on Bitcoin is super bullish. And then we heard from obviously Ordeez, borrowing and lending on ordinals, and buy now, pay later for ordinals, super exciting. And then Autara bringing yield to your Bitcoin, dropping the alpha about being able to borrow and lend using stable coins on Bitcoin, super bullish. Couldn't be more excited about the future. And then getting back to Molina's question, I mean, we'll just throw it back out there. How are we gonna, actually, I'll let you ask it. You came and asked it, and I think 2 spaces that I've been in, and it just sounds better when you say it.
Pump our bags.
Yeah, that's what I couldn't remember if it was pump our bags or when going to the moon or like which
I would like to know when am I gonna open up my Bitcoin wallets and be happy? Let's make it about me now, Brian. Okay, take it away. Take it away, everybody.
Yeah, in time for sure you're gonna be very happy, you know? As long as you don't see it every day. But on the VoltFi side, what I can say is that you're gonna be able to connect your Xverse wallet and have ways of leveraging volatility, Bitcoin volatility, to get a little bit more Bitcoin. And with that, we can help you increase your stash. But we all need the whole market to also go up. But we're gonna make your bag a little bit bigger on the quantity. Let's see on the price.
Yeah, and even like just to kind of like get into that question specifically, the potential for number go up related to the I always related to the ecosystem development. This is like the first thing that comes to mind to me. And I think that can become sort of like a broken record a little bit, but there's some more specific things that we can talk about. And even like the representatives on this stage we're talking about things to do with your Bitcoin that are scarcely available, or if they're available, very clunky for all of the representatives on the stage. And then when it comes to trading ordinals, we're talking about individual assets. Sometimes when it comes to culture based, non fungible token assets, it's very much on the cycles of culture. But there is, I think, a lot to say and to speak for when it comes to development on the tech side of things. And we talked about that when we were talking about Ordeez a little bit earlier. But these other products that are bringing new experiences from a trading standpoint to Bitcoin and new capabilities of what you can do with your Bitcoin, I think are in that category of unrealized potential where we just really don't know yet because we've not had, I think, a holistic litmus test, but only tests of the individual levers, so to speak. I think, for example, there have been some really big run-ups of individual meme coins on Bitcoin. And we've seen the interest tick up when it comes to trading on both individual coins. So people are excited about the culture coin itself, and then they'll go buy it wherever they can buy it. And then there's the other aspect of the platform experience where people like the experience of trading with this app. So you've got two aspects of this new token economy that is faster, which is another aspect that is bundled together what Arch brings as a holistic offering. Trading on Bitcoin is about to be entirely different than it ever was from an onboarding standpoint. So I think that people that haven't traded on Bitcoin before are going to have a more seamless cross chain experience that'll be reinforced when they experience it directly with a Bitcoin wallet for the first time. I think they'll find a lot of familiarity that'll make them stay and then start to engage more directly. I also think the onboarding will become more seamless for people that are in the ecosystem, and Bitcoin is going to catch up with all of the others when it comes to becoming a new user of crypto and learning how to do things. And it's maybe a little more clunky, and you've got some security things that you need to think about and learn when it comes to, I mean, we're assuming that it's engaging in decentralized crypto, like self custody, because that's the whole sector that we're in, right? But I think that another test that we saw is what's the appetite for this type of trading on a solution that's not a centralized exchange. It still comes back to that final problem of sourcing the liquidity, being able to have composable DeFi at the underlying layer, machine level consensus, virtual machine, all of the stuff that's not existent on Bitcoin at the base layer. So to bring it all home, you have to have everything. You have to have the offering for developers to be able to create the applications in a way that is giving them whatever security that they need, along with the data and composability that they need to construct their applications, right? And then that has to be mirrored with the ability to have a seamless user experience. So all of that is on the table. I couldn't be more bullish and excited about the future and the next several weeks. Just to wrap us up, we've got updates from some projects around the ecosystem and updates from a technical standpoint. Brian was on with us earlier. If you're a developer in the space, if you're a builder, if you work with a team in the Bitcoin space or Solana space, and you've thought about building a product on Bitcoin, then reach out to our team. You can listen back to some of the updates if you're a developer about how you can dive in, or just go to our website and dive into the resources. You can contact us and we'll get you plugged into building on Bitcoin. In terms of the final developments, we are just weeks away from being ready for our mainnet launch. We've talked about our security audit from time to time and given some updates. The last timeline that I heard was that we're about 2 weeks away from completing that. Obviously, we haven't announced any dates for when we're launching, but beyond concluding our security audit, that wraps up the code being ready for mainnet and our final sprint to do our alpha release and on to full decentralization on Bitcoin. So stay tuned for more specific dates later. That puts us really getting into some exciting times in September. We could be on mainnet by end of September, getting into October. We really don't know. I've been kind of hunting around for even trying to gauge it myself. When we answer the question, like when mainnet, the date is not set, but the way that I explain that is to say that that's more of an indicator that it's super close than any length of time. We are about 2 weeks away from the audit completing, and from there, it's just a matter of when to click launch. So super bullish, and definitely stay tuned for more specifics around that stuff. Make sure you stay tuned for more news on our resources coming to Circle. We're going to be using Circle as sort of a central hub for resources, both for developers looking to build on Arch, as well as users looking to on Arch. So stay tuned for more coming out on that front, as well as everything else. And thanks again for everybody that joined us on the speaker panel. Excited for all of you to launch with us on mainnet and for everything to keep developing and pushing forward. Couldn't be more excited. Anybody have any final thoughts to wrap us up? If not, I'll cue up our outro and we'll be
That outro is so good, Brian. Like, yes,
is,
it's
I think I'll change it to something different every week. And then I'm like, nah, I don't think so.
always like I can't wait to listen to it.
It like convicts me a little bit, like it convicts even people that are in Bitcoin like need to hear it again. You need to listen to this so you don't fall into the trap anymore.
I just wanted to tell everyone, if you're in Hong Kong, have the best time ever. Maybe we can do a little reporting back. I think we've got some of the team from Arch in Hong Kong for next week to do a summary of what went down and what people were doing there. Thank you so much, Brian, for doing these and for everyone for being here. I am posting a lot about Ethereum lately, but don't get it. Oh, I was getting a phone call. Do you guys hear me now?
They thought I was going to say I muted you.
No, I was just gonna say, how funny is that? I was like, I know I've been tweeting a lot about ETH, but don't get it twisted. I'm still the girly on Bitcoin, and I still most of my bag is Bitcoin, but I gotta, I gotta be part of the algorithm. I gotta be, I gotta get in in the algo. So don't hate me for tweeting about Ethereum right now. But no, thank you so much, Brian. Like I said, just eager to see what people come out with coming out of like Hong Kong. But obviously, for all the builders who are building on Arch, hearing from them, I can't reiterate this enough. It's so fun and interesting to hear about why people are building on Bitcoin and why they're choosing to come on Arch. So yeah, just keep them coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always love hearing from the projects and just kind of like imagining more possibilities from there. So thanks again for everybody that came and explained what you're building with us. Super bullish. And yeah, you mentioned Bitcoin Asia going on right now. I think maybe tomorrow. Yeah, I don't know. Like there's so many hours ahead of us, so I don't know like whether it's like tomorrow that is like the opening night or like tonight technically, and then the conference. And then yeah, also we'll be at Korean Blockchain Week as well as Token 2049 in Singapore. So stay tuned for more posts from the main account as well as content. We'll have some more video production down the line as well. So all kinds of exciting things happening. Make sure that you're following the main host account and as well click through to the Arch Labs account, which is just at Arch. Make sure you're following both accounts. They do have different content. It's not just reposting different things. So if you're someone that wants to stay tuned in specifically to development more broadly and more highly technical content, even like the investor side of things. Sometimes the Arch Labs account has a much different type of content than our community focused and ecosystem account, Arch Network. So make sure that you're following both of those, especially if you're having that focus. Thanks again for coming today. We'll wrap up here and we'll be back. We do these every Tuesday at about 1:30 Eastern time, the Bitcoin Builders Show, and have different projects from our own ecosystem or around the Bitcoin development space. We love Bitcoin and keep stacking those sats. Thanks again for coming.